So, imagine this. You are standing in the middle of the office break room. Or maybe you were lingering on one of those virtual team calls right before the official meeting actually starts.
Oh, yeah, the classic kind of awkward pre-meeting limbo where everyone is just casually chatting.
Exactly, yeah. And you have just witnessed the most unbelievable, slightly absurd interaction involving your senior leadership. Like, you are holding on to the perfect piece of workplace gossip.
A total golden nugget of a story.
Right. So the floor is yours. Everyone is looking at you, completely dialed in. You have built up the suspense beautifully, but right as you go to deliver the punchline, I mean, the crucial piece of dialogue that ties the whole narrative together, your words get slightly tangled.
Oh no, I can already feel where this is going.
Yeah, it's the worst. You reach for a verb and you just grab the wrong one. You say something like, oh, so the director said me that, and the momentum instantly flatlines.
It really does. It's like you can physically feel the air leave the room.
Yeah. The audience's eyes glaze over for just a fraction of a second. I mean, it is a microscopic stumble, but it is enough. The magic of the moment just completely dissipates.
It really is a totally deflationary feeling.
Mm.
The story was humming along beautifully, and then suddenly the listener is just jolted right out of the narrative.
Jolted out, exactly.
It is akin to reading a beautifully formatted, highly impressive resume, and right under the, core competencies section, you spot a glaring fundamental typo.
Right, like spelling attention to detail wrong.
Exactly. It does not necessarily mean the person cannot do the job, but it creates this tiny mental speed bump.
Yeah.
The reader, or in your break room scenario, the listener is briefly distracted from your competence because they have to, process the mechanical error.
Right, it creates a subtle friction. And what is so frustrating is that it is not because you forgot the details of the story or because you lack the vocabulary to describe what happened.
No, not at all.
It is because of a microscopic structural failure in the language itself. Which brings us to today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are targeting a very specific, universally frustrating linguistic trap.
And it's a trap that catches so many people.
It really is. We have been reviewing an excerpt from a really fascinating English language audio series, and it's appropriately titled Mastering the Nuances of Say and Tell. And honestly, it really got us thinking about the hidden mechanics of how we communicate.
Yeah, it is a topic that sounds almost deceptively simple on the surface, right? Say and tell.
Just two tiny everyday words.
Exactly. These are fundamental verbs. They're among the very first action words we acquire when we learn to speak, whether it is our native tongue or a second language. But as this audio series points out, this specific area of verb confusion acts as a subtle drag on effective communication.
A drag on communication, yeah.
It happens to language learners who are translating in their heads, and, it happens to native speakers whose brains are just moving 3 steps ahead of their mouths.
It really does. And for you listening, whether you are that native speaker prone to merging your sentences when you get super excited, or you are a language learner actively striving for that seamless, polished fluency, mastering these tiny, seemingly insignificant hinges of grammar is incredibly powerful.
It's transformative, really.
It is. It is essentially a shortcut to sounding more authoritative, maintaining the rhythm of your narratives, and keeping your audience completely locked into your ideas rather than, your syntax.
Because language, especially in a professional or social setting, it isn't just about the raw transfer of data.
No, it's definitely not.
It is a performance.
Mm.
It is about pacing, rhythm, and cognitive ease. When the structural rhythm of a sentence breaks, the listener's brain is forced to stop processing the substance of your story and start processing the mechanics of your air.
Like they hit a mental pothole.
Exactly. They have to play translator for a split second.
Which is exactly what we want to avoid. So later on, we are going to look at a highly relatable real-world case study to see how this plays out in practice.
The famous Bruce scenario.
Yes, Bruce. We're going to examine a scenario involving a guy named Bruce who is struggling to recount a story about his boss because he is caught in this exact linguistic trap. But before we get to Bruce and the workplace dynamics of storytelling, we need to establish the ground rules.
We really have to lay the foundation first.
Right. We need to look at the core argument here, the absolute structural foundation separating these two incredibly common verbs.
The dividing line, so to speak. It is essential to understand the mechanics before we look at the breakdown.
Okay, let's unpack this. The audio lesson we are diving into distills this entirely complex, often confusing grammar module down to one incredibly elegant foundational rule, and it is this: We tell someone, but we say something.
Tell someone, say something.
That is the anchor. Tell someone, say something.
It is a brilliant distillation because it gets right to the functional heart of the words. I mean, it moves away from textbook definitions and focuses entirely on the required immediate environment of the verb.
Right. And I was trying to visualize this while reviewing the material just to make this abstract grammatical concept a bit more concrete for you listening. And I thought about it like the difference between a light bulb and a laser pointer.
Oh, a light bulb and a laser pointer. I like that.
So, say is the light bulb. When you turn on a light bulb in a room, it just radiates light in all directions. It does not really matter if anyone is standing there to see it or where exactly the light lands. It is just putting illumination out into the world.
So it's not targeted.
Exactly. You are focusing purely on the something being emitted, the words being spoken. Like if I walk into an empty room and state, I said the sky is blue, the focus is entirely on the fact that the sky is blue. The statement itself is the light.
That is a very apt way to visualize it. And the laser pointer, how does that map to the other half of the rule?
Well, the laser pointer is tell. You do not generally just turn on a laser pointer for the sake of illuminating a room, right? You activate a laser pointer to aim it at a specific destination.
Right, like pointing it at a presentation board or a specific line on a graph.
Yes. It requires a target. In this framework, tell is the laser beam. It demands a specific destination, and in language, that destination is the person or people receiving the information. You tell someone, you aim the information directly at a human target.
What's fascinating here is the underlying historical and, well, psycholinguistic mechanics of that analogy.
Oh, tell me more about that.
When we look at the deep structure of the language, the word tell inherently demands a human, or at least an animate receiver. This isn't just an arbitrary stylistic choice invented by grammarians centuries ago.
It's not just some old guy making up rules.
No, not at all. It is a mechanical, evolutionary requirement of the verb. If we trace the etymology back, it makes perfect sense. We have to look at the conceptual difference between the physical action of vocalizing versus the social action of informing.
Okay, the action of vocalizing versus informing. That sounds like a crucial distinction. How does that map onto the history of these words?
Well, if you look at the roots of the word say, it actually comes from old Germanic roots related to seeing or pointing something out.
Pointing something out, okay.
Right. It is declarative. When you say something, you are engaging in the physical and conceptual act of vocalization. You are producing language to make a thought manifest in the world.
So the focus is on what you made.
Yes, exactly. The grammatical focus is entirely on the product of your mouth. The words, the quote, the statement. That is why the rule is say something. The something is the product.
Like manufacturing a sentence and just putting it on the table.
Precisely. But tell has a completely different lineage. The Old English root of tell is tellin, which originally meant to calculate, to count, or to enumerate.
To count, like numbers.
Yes. It is the exact same root that gives us the word for a bank teller, or a tally mark.
Wait, really? A bank teller and telling a story come from the exact same root?
They do, because historically telling was a transactional process. You were recounting a ledger, item by item, to another person. You were settling an account.
Oh, wow. That completely shifts how I think about that word.
Right. And because it is fundamentally a transaction, you cannot have a transaction without a recipient. I mean, you cannot hand over a tally if there's no one there to take it.
That makes so much sense.
Therefore, the grammatical structure of tell evolved to demand that the recipient be placed immediately after the verb. The core action isn't the vocalization of the words themselves. The action is the transfer of information to another mind. You are aiming the laser pointer.
That is incredibly illuminating. But I have to push back a little bit here because language is rarely that clean, right?
Oh, certainly not.
If the absolute golden rule is that tell requires a laser-focused target, a human receiver, what about common phrases where that doesn't happen?
Like what?
For instance, I can tell a joke, I can tell the truth, I can tell a lie, or even, tell time. In none of those phrases am I actively inserting a someone right after the verb.
That's a very fair point.
Are these just blatant violations of the rule we just established?
That is an excellent pushback, and it gets right to the heart of how language actually operates in the real world versus in a sterile textbook. You are entirely correct.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not crazy.
No, tell a lie, tell the truth, tell a story, tell time. These are all universally accepted phrases that seem to completely ignore the tell someone rule. But linguistically, We classify these as collocations or fixed idioms.
Fixed idioms, meaning they're basically frozen in time.
Exactly. They are linguistic fossils. They are highly specific, tightly bound pairings of words that have been used together for so many centuries that they operate outside the standard grammatical machinery.
So they get a free pass.
Pretty much. Think about telling time. You aren't transferring information to a clock, right?
No, of course not.
You are calculating the hours, which calls right back to that ancient tellin' root of counting.
Oh, wow, that ties together perfectly.
And when you tell a joke or tell a story, the phrase itself implies a communal setting. The audience is basically baked into the concept of a joke or a story.
Because what is a joke if there's no one there to laugh at it?
Exactly. But for the vast, vast majority of dynamic, everyday conversational sentence building, when you are recounting what happened in a meeting or passing along instructions, the laser pointer rule holds firm. Tell someone. Say something.
Okay, that makes complete sense. The idioms are the exceptions that prove the rule. But let's look at the listener's experience for a second.
Yep.
If I am talking to you and I mess this up, if I drop the light bulb when I should use the laser pointer, say I blurt out, I told that the project was delayed, instead of I said that the project was delayed.
Right.
Is this just a pedantic annoyance, or does it genuinely alter how your brain processes the information I am trying to share?
Oh, it absolutely alters the cognitive processing, and we have to elevate this far beyond pedantic nitpicking. It has to do with psycholinguistics, specifically how the human brain predicts language in real time.
Predicts language, like guessing what comes next.
Yes. We often think of listening as a passive activity, like a bucket catching water drops one by one. But neuroscientists have shown that listening is actually a highly active, metabolically expensive, predictive process.
Metabolically expensive? Wow. So our brains are really working hard.
They are working incredibly hard. When a listener hears you speak, their brain is milliseconds ahead of you, continuously predicting the structural shape of your next sentence based on the specific verbs you choose.
It is like the autocomplete feature on our phones, but happening subconsciously in our brains.
That is the perfect analogy. So when your listener's brain hears you articulate the word tell, it instantly and subconsciously opens up a mental slot for a person. It expects the laser pointer to hit a target.
Right, because tell demands a receiver.
Yes. If you say, I told, the listener's brain goes, okay, who did you tell? Me, the boss, the team.
It's waiting for the data to fill that slot.
Exactly. If you follow the verb tell with a something instead of a someone, if you say, I told the meeting is canceled, the listener's brain hits a sudden wall. The highly anticipated syntactic slot was left empty, and an unexpected grammatical structure was shoved in its place. The autocomplete just failed.
So they actually stumble internally. It is a neurological hiccup.
Yes. And in neuroscience, they can actually measure this.
Really? They can see the hiccup.
They can. When the brain encounters a semantic anomaly, like if I said, I drink my coffee with milk and socks.
Milk and socks? Oh, man, what a terrible visual.
Yeah, not great. But when it hears that, the brain produces a specific electrical spike called an N400 wave.
Because it's a meaning error. Socks doesn't make sense there.
Right. But when it encounters a syntactic or grammatical structural anomaly, like I told at the meeting, it produces a completely different wave called a P600.
P600.
It is a literal, measurable surge of cognitive dissonance. The listener's brain has to halt its predictive engine, backtrack, correct your grammar in their own working memory so the sentence makes logical sense, and then frantically try to catch up with the rest of the story you're continuing to tell.
Wow. You have effectively forced them to do unpaid translation work in their own head.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. Unpaid translation work.
And while they are doing that translation work, while their brain is firing off those P600 waves, they are no longer engaged with the plot of your story. They have stepped entirely out of the narrative flow.
Precisely. They miss the next 2 or 3 seconds of your actual content because their cognitive resources are tied up fixing your structural foundation.
That is truly fascinating. So this seemingly minor, invisible nuance, tell someone, say something, is not just a rule for a middle school grammar quiz. It is actually a load-bearing pillar of storytelling.
It is. It's structural.
It is the structural foundation required to keep an audience emotionally and intellectually present with you, which, leads us perfectly into looking at a practical, real-world case study.
Ah, yes. Let's talk about Bruce.
Yes. What happens when that structural foundation completely crumbles in the middle of a high-stakes professional environment?
Let's look at the scenario provided in the audio series. The case study of Bruce.
Right. So we have this guy, Bruce. And he is trying to recount a story to his colleagues about his boss. It is supposed to be this engaging, funny anecdote, but Bruce keeps mixing these two specific verbs up. He is fundamentally caught in the trap of verb confusion.
Let's really analyze the stakes of Bruce's situation, because we have to recognize the context matters immensely here. Bruce isn't just making a casual throwaway remark about the weather at a bus stop.
No, he has an audience.
Exactly. He is attempting to recount a narrative, and crucially, it is a narrative involving an authority figure. He is talking about his boss to his peers.
Right. The social stakes in a professional environment are incredibly high here. Storytelling in the workplace is rarely just about sharing facts. It is an active performance.
It's how we navigate the hierarchy.
Absolutely. It is how we build social capital. It requires momentum, it requires impeccable timing, and it requires a smooth flow. When you are standing in the break room telling a story about the boss, you are temporarily holding court. People are evaluating you. You are navigating office politics, trying to land a bit of humor, and demonstrating your own social awareness all at the exact same time.
And perhaps most importantly, you are trying to establish and maintain your own credibility.
Credibility is huge.
If you are going to recount an anecdote about a superior, analyzing their actions or decisions, you need to sound like you are firmly in control of the narrative. You need to project a subtle, underlying competence so that your peers trust your interpretation of the event.
But Bruce is constantly dropping the light bulb and misfiring the laser pointer.
He is a grammatical hazard in this break room.
Let's look at the actual cognitive friction this causes in real time. If Bruce is suffering from this specific brand of verb confusion, he is probably throwing out sentences like, "So I told that my boss was going to be angry." Or even worse, "Then my boss said me that I needed to redo the entire report."
My boss said me. Oh, even just hearing you say it in a hypothetical context, you can physically feel the conversational gears grinding to a sudden, jarring halt.
It does feel like a pebble in your shoe. When Bruce mixes these up, how exactly does it derail the listener's perception of him? You mentioned the mental autocomplete failing and those P600 brainwaves, but what is the compounding sociolinguistic effect of this happening multiple times over the course of a single 2-minute story?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of workplace psychology, the compounding effect is a slow, quiet erosion of trust, engagement, and perceived authority.
An erosion of trust. That sounds serious.
It is. The very first time Bruce slips up and says, "My boss said me," the listener's brain does that micro-stumble we discussed, but socially, they forgive it.
Sure, everybody makes mistakes.
Right. They chalk it up to a slip of the tongue. We all talk faster than we think sometimes, but the cognitive tax was still paid.
The listener still had to fix it in their head.
Exactly. Then 30 seconds later, Bruce does it again. He says, "So I told the director that." Now, the listener's cognitive load doubles. They are no longer passively enjoying an anecdote. They are actively working to translate Bruce's non-standard syntax into standard English.
They are engaged in continuous error correction.
Yes. They are essentially doing homework instead of enjoying a break room story.
That is exactly what it feels like to the brain. And psychologically, as this cognitive fatigue sets in, the listener begins to subconsciously downgrade Bruce's authority.
They absolutely do. This is the real psychological impact of verb confusion in a professional setting. Mixing up foundational, everyday verbs while trying to analyze complex interpersonal dynamics subtly undermines the speaker's perceived competence.
Because if you can't get the basics right.
Exactly. The audience's subconscious thought process becomes, if Bruce cannot navigate the basic elementary sentence structure required to deliver this information, why should I trust his complex interpretation of the boss's underlying motives?
The distraction of the broken vehicle completely consumes the value of the cargo.
That is a very grounded, accurate way to put it. The syntactic vehicle is broken, so the semantic cargo never truly arrives at its destination.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The tragic irony of Bruce's situation.
The irony.
Yes. Bruce probably has an objectively amazing story. He might be the most observant guy in the office. He might have incredible insight into the boss's behavior. The actual content of his narrative, the gossip itself, could be absolute gold.
It could be the best story of the year.
Right. But the delivery mechanism, his lack of mastery over these tiny microscopic verbs, is completely sabotaging the content. It doesn't matter how great the cargo is if the truck delivering it has 3 flat tires and keeps veering into oncoming traffic.
The listener is too terrified by the ride to appreciate what is in the back.
Exactly. And we should be clear, This exact phenomenon happens to both language learners and native speakers, albeit for entirely different reasons.
It does. It's a universal trap, really.
Let's explore that. Why do native speakers fall into this trap if they inherently know the rules?
Well, for a native speaker, verb confusion usually arises from cognitive traffic jams.
Cognitive traffic jams, I like that.
A native speaker like Bruce might just be talking too fast. His brain is trying to merge two simultaneous thoughts. Half of his brain wants to say, I said to him, and the other half wants to say, I told him.
Ah, I see.
In his excitement to get the punchline out, the two structures collide in his vocal tract, and what comes out is a tangled hybrid. I said him. It is an error of speed and excitement.
That makes total sense. I definitely catch myself doing that when I'm rushing a story. I just mash two sentences together.
We all do it.
But what about the language learner? Why is this specific trap so notoriously difficult for non-native English speakers to conquer?
For language learners, it is an issue of direct translation and conceptual mapping. In many, many other languages across the globe, the conceptual difference between say and tell simply does not exist as two separate, highly distinct high-frequency verbs.
Really? They don't have separate words for them?
Yeah, often, no. Take Romance languages, for example. In Spanish, you have the verb decir. You can use decir to mean say, like él dijo que, meaning he said that. And you use the exact same verb to mean tell, like me dijo que, meaning he told me that.
Oh, wow.
The same goes for French with dire or Italian with dire.
So they basically have one unified tool for both the light bulb and the laser pointer.
Exactly. They have one highly versatile verb that relies on surrounding object pronouns to clarify the direction of the information. So when a native Spanish or French speaker learns English, they logically try to map their one versatile tool onto our two highly specific, rigidly constrained tools.
And that's where the wires get crossed.
Right. They assume say and tell are just synonyms that can be swapped interchangeably based on whatever sounds best in the moment. They're directly translating the concept of communication without realizing that English mechanically separates the act of vocalizing from the act of targeting a receiver.
That is fascinating. So Bruce, if he happens to be a language learner, is fighting a massive, deeply ingrained uphill battle against his own native neurological wiring.
He really is. It takes a lot of conscious unlearning.
But it is a battle that can be won, which brings us to the entire promise of the audio lesson we are discussing today. The source material doesn't just point and laugh at the problem. It titles itself as the solution, mastering the nuances, no more verb confusion.
Yes, the light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. Let's shift our focus away from the breakdown of Bruce's story and look at the path to mastery.
The goal is to eradicate this confusion completely,
Yes.
so that the structural foundation becomes invisible again.
Yes. And I want to zoom in on a specific word the audio series uses, nuance. Mastering the nuances of say and tell. From a linguistic standpoint, why is the distinction between these two basic words considered a nuance rather than just a massive, gaping vocabulary deficit?
That is a vital distinction to make, especially for adult learners, who often feel incredibly frustrated by these mistakes. A vocabulary gap is straightforward. It is when you simply do not possess the label for a concept.
I just don't know the word.
Exactly. If you do not know the English word for microscope, you have a vocabulary gap. You are forced to talk around it. You have to awkwardly describe it to your lab partner as, the metal tube with glass that makes small things look very big.
Right. You are missing a brick to build the house.
Exactly. But say and tell do not represent vocabulary gaps. Everyone, from a native-speaking toddler to a first-year ESL student, knows these words. They are among the top 50 most frequently used verbs in the entire English lexicon. You are not missing the bricks.
We probably use them hundreds of times a day without even thinking about it.
Precisely. So the challenge here isn't acquiring the words. The challenge is mastering their highly specific, microscopic deployment in real-time conversation. That is the very definition of nuance.
Knowing exactly how to use the tool.
Yes. Nuance is understanding that two tools might look incredibly similar in a toolbox, like a scalpel and a paring knife. They both fundamentally cut things, but they are engineered for vastly different tasks, requiring entirely different levels of precision.
I love that analogy.
Right. You wouldn't use a scalpel to peel an apple, and you certainly wouldn't use a paring knife for open-heart surgery.
Even though they are both technically knives.
Correct. Verb confusion regarding these everyday high-frequency words is often the absolute final hurdle to true, polished fluency or masterful public speaking. It is much harder to fix than a vocabulary gap because these words are so common that they fade into the background. We stop paying attention to them. We run on autopilot.
I really love that perspective. It frames fluency not as an unending quest to memorize the dictionary, but as a refinement of the basics.
Yes, mastering the
It
fundamentals.
is not about learning bigger, fancier, multisyllabic words just to sound smart in the break room. You don't need to replace the word say with articulate, and you don't need to replace tell with pronounce or declare.
Please don't do that.
Right. Because doing that often sounds wildly unnatural and pretentious. It is about utilizing the simple, everyday, foundational verbs with absolute, unshakable precision.
That is exactly right. Trying to shoehorn fancy vocabulary into a casual story usually alienates the listener. The true hallmark of a masterful communicator is the absolute invisible perfection of their basic syntactic structures.
So they don't even notice the grammar.
Exactly. When the foundation is flawless, when there are no P600 brainwaves firing off in your listener's head, their mind is completely freed up to focus 100% of its processing power on the brilliance, the humor, or the insight of your ideas.
So bringing this all together, what does this practically mean for you, the listener? If you are prepping for a major presentation at work tomorrow, or if you just want to make absolutely sure you nail the punchline of your hilarious story at the dinner table this weekend, how can you actively monitor your own storytelling?
You need a strategy.
Exactly. What is the practical mechanism to ensure you aren't falling into the Bruce trap?
It requires cultivating a habit of conscious linguistic mindfulness, specifically as you approach the dialogue portions of your story. As you are gearing up to quote someone or pass along a piece of information, I would synthesize the takeaway like this. You need to remind yourself of the core anchor we discussed earlier. Before you open your mouth to deliver the quote, always, always look for the receiver.
Look for the target of the laser pointer.
Yes. Scan the sentence that is forming in your working memory and ask yourself one simple question. Am I about to name the specific person or group who heard this?
Okay. And if the answer is yes.
If the answer is yes, if there is a someone immediately following the verb space, whether it is me, him, her, the team, the boss, the board of directors, the verb must be tell. You must grab the laser pointer. He told me. I told the executive team.
And if there is no target, if it's just the message itself.
If you scan the upcoming sentence and realize that the very next word out of your mouth is the message itself, the quote, the fact, or the abstract idea, then you grab the light bulb. It is say, he said the budget was approved. I said no. They said it would rain.
Say something, tell someone. It really is an incredibly elegant cognitive anchor.
It is very effective once you make it a habit.
It gives you a split-second checklist to run through, and I think just being deeply aware of the friction it causes when you get it wrong, understanding that you are literally forcing your listener's brain to stumble and translate is enough motivation to pause for a microsecond and select the right tool.
Absolutely. The fear of that P600 wave is a great motivator.
It really is. It is genuinely amazing to step back and reflect on how a simple, practically invisible grammatical adjustment can so instantly and profoundly elevate your conversational prowess. It is quite literally the difference between delivering a clunky, stumbling narrative that drains your social capital and weaving a smooth, magnetic story that captivates a room.
It is the polish on the lens. When the lens is perfectly clear and devoid of smudges, the listener does not even notice the glass. They just see your ideas perfectly and brilliantly illuminated.
As we start to wind down this deep dive, let's briefly trace the conceptual journey we have been on today. We started by extracting the foundational golden rule from our audio lesson, the essential difference between the light bulb and the laser beam. We established that mechanically, historically, and syntactically, you tell someone, but you say something.
We then moved into the psycholinguistics of the break room, looking at the cautionary case study of Bruce. We analyzed how fumbling that specific structural rule while trying to recount a high-stakes story about an authority figure didn't just constitute a minor grammar error. It actively destroyed his narrative momentum.
It really did.
It fired off error signals in his listeners' brains, forced them into cognitive translation, and ultimately subtly undermined his own professional credibility and authority. The cognitive friction was just too high for the audience to stay passively engaged.
And finally, we explored the ultimate goal, eliminating that verb confusion for good by understanding the nature of nuance. We recognize that true polished fluency isn't about acquiring the most obscure, impressive words in the dictionary. It is about mastering the precise, microscopic deployment of the everyday verbs we use hundreds of times a day.
It's all in the details.
For you listening, we know your time is immensely valuable, and your intellectual curiosity is what drives you to listen to deep dives like this. As someone who appreciates continuous learning, we want to reinforce that it is exactly these types of seemingly minor micro-adjustments, these tiny, invisible grammatical hinges that compound over time into major, noticeable intellectual and communicative growth.
Small hinges truly do swing very big doors.
They absolutely do. The mechanics matter. And as we leave you today, I want to give you a final, somewhat provocative thought to mull over or explore on your own as you navigate your week. We spent a lot of time today talking about Bruce and his boss and the social dynamics of the workplace.
We sure did.
Think about the most frequent stories you recount about your own workplace, or your own boss, your clients, or your colleagues. When you naturally structure and tell those stories, do you instinctively focus more on the someone you are telling?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
Do you favor aiming that laser pointer with the verb tell, focusing heavily on the interpersonal dynamics, who was in the room and who received the directive? Or do you instinctively focus more on the something you are saying? Do you favor radiating the information out like a light bulb with the verb say, focusing purely on the objective facts, the quotes, and the data of what occurred?
This raises a profoundly important question about your own baseline communication style and how you view the world.
Exactly. Because how might consciously and strategically choosing between those two verbs, actively choosing whether to highlight the human receiver with tell or highlight the objective message with say, entirely shift the subtle power dynamics of the story you were trying to share?
It changes the whole angle.
By saying, I said we needed more time, you center your own voice and the idea itself. But by saying, I told the CEO we needed more time, you center the interpersonal friction and the impact on the listener. Think about that the next time you're standing in the break room, all eyes on you, waiting in suspense, ready to deliver the perfect punchline. Make sure you are consciously choosing the right tool for the job.
Don't let your syntax sabotage your story.
Absolutely. Until next time.